Notice what you're feeling, whatever it is that you're feeling, without having to change it at all. Just arrive and be inside yourself. And I was thinking in terms of an opening constellation-y type of exercise or ritual, given the theme of this weekend, is to, and we've done different kind of honoring our ancestors kind of stuff, to honor the work our ancestors have done.
Like the labor?
Yeah, what they did to put food on the table and a roof over their head.
Okay.
Including the possibility that they inherited everything and they never worked, right? I mean, that's always a possibility, right? One of the things I run into clients frequently who are struggling with work is that they're having a hard time respecting the work that their predecessors did. Because it was, too businessy, or it was too poor, or it was too something or other, right? And coming into a good, respectful relationship with the work that our ancestors did, so that we are free to choose the work that we would like to do, is pretty good hygiene, pretty good ancestral hygiene. So what I thought we'd do is we just go around, take a moment, think about the work that you know of, yeah? Nurses and teachers and whatever else. And we're going to go around in a circle and just say, my name is, I come from, and I'm going to invite you to do this in a really nice, kind of centered, dignified, primary motion kind of a way. I come from, and then you can name up to 4 or 5. Try not, this is not about being exhaustive and catching them all. And then leave a pause before the next person, just so that we can all kind of feel the field of that work and what it accomplished on behalf of your ancestors, so that they had enough in order to someday have you. Yeah. Everyone have a sense of that, what we're up to? So I'll role model and then popcorn style. My name is Leslie. I come from ranchers and businessmen and missionaries and writers. Anyone can go next.
My name is John V. I come from farmers, teachers, theater performers, businessmen, and some who inherited wealth and ran hotels in St. Louis.
My name is Amy. I come from farmers and from an engineer and newspaper systems expert and restaurant owners.
My name is Peter, and I come from also farmers, doctors, a studio, movie studio transportation person, and a French hat maker.
My name is Christina. Gosh, it's so disparate. I come from farmers at one point, politicians, mathematician, psychiatrist, spiritual person.
My name is Irina. I'm from farmers, homemakers, business people, men and women, and theater performers.
Couldn't hear that last one.
Theater performers.
I'm still not hearing it. What is it?
Theater performance.
Theater performers. Got it. Yeah.
My name is Volker, and I come from engineers, craft people, farmers, and hotel owners.
My name is Guy. I come from a school teacher who was an opera singer in her younger years. Her parents were farmers. And then my father was in the state police force, the Carabineros. Beyond that, I have no clue.
And we honor the work they did. Yeah.
Okay, my name is Jeff. I come from sheet metal shop foreman.
Little louder, Jeff.
Sheet metal shop foreman, electronic assembler, logging industry, car sales, store owner. No farmers that I'm aware of. This is maybe merchant marine.
So for just a moment, feel the field of the work our ancestors did that in part made it possible for us to be here. It's just kind of a nice feeling, even when some of that work may have been, it wasn't all honorable, but it all has a place. Thank you, everybody. So, everyone say hello to Volker. You've already done that informally. We're going to switch chairs in just a minute, but we decided that just for opening check-in, I'd be here, and then after that, we're going to switch chairs. He's going to be here. Most of the weekend is going to be in Volker's hands, in your hands with Volker. After lunch, I think both days, there's a plan, seeing if things go this way for me to kind of pipe up and see what I'm noticing and how it's doing a little integrating with the other work that we've been doing. But other than that, mostly to sort of be here. And Volker's going to start out with a little bit of overview, but also a little bit of, asking you what you want. So that's going to come. So for right now, check in. I'd like to do this in 2 stages. The first stage is the more personal, how you're doing, but also both in the context of personally, like what's going on in your life that you might want us to know about. But also with respect to the class and how that's going. And then the second half is just any questions, getting a little bit more into wonky land about constellations and whatnot. I think it's useful to keep those two just a little bit separate because Leslie has the downside of getting interested in a wonky question and then we're off into that land rather than spending a little time actually checking in a hard place. So Let's do it. Someone go and then ask the next person to go. And if you want to pass, that's of course fine. You don't have to share. Yeah, just how you're doing with the class, how you're doing personally, how you're doing, kind of check in.
That's too much.
No,
It felt like it was blowing right on me, so I froze it, and then now I realize.
no, I'm fine. I was just noticing the paper flying a little bit. I can always put another layer on. The other thing to do would be to face it towards the wall, and then it just cycles the room a little bit.
Perfect.
It should cool off the room without anyone having to have it blowing right on them.
That's nice.
So,
Popcorn?
yeah.
Okay.
Guys ready?
So, yeah, I'm doing well. I got a nice bonus at work this year, which I hope make some progress toward paying off some debt, so that's nice. I'm going to take some of that and sign up for some coaching from our friend Scott Mills, which is just kind of see how that goes. And I saw this Indian woman say, different mama than Huggy Mama, Purnamai, yesterday or Thursday, and had a chance to write down my wish list and have her do a personal blessing on me. So, and I have a date tonight that I've been kind of waiting for almost 3 weeks for. I'm kind of very chilled about it at this point. Just because I'm clear, like I'm not gonna go on sugar highs. I'm just gonna unless it's a hell yes, I'm just okay, cool. And and I'm only a month away from the last top level vortex healing class. Brand new, never been given before, but I will be in line for it.
Your knee looks better?
Yeah, knee is doing great. Doing physical therapy. I had knee surgery 5 weeks ago.
Wow.
And then just in terms of personal stuff that belongs here, you said something got kicked up last night?
God.
I was waiting for the real check-in.
Well, okay.
And again, briefly,
Okay,
right?
yeah, very briefly.
Yeah,
So,
right.
We got into a family constellation. For me, I and my particular weird family dynamic, which is that my father was married. When he met my mom, they had an affair. So I'm the product of that. So I was excluded from my father's whole family, who lives in Chile. He has 7 other children, but I've only met him twice in my life. The dynamic between my mom and I is I'm her emotional partner. It's just and I'd like to have a family. So it's a whole Gordian knot that just kind of was
And was there a new angle on it last night?
no, it was just deeper appreciation after, literally, it was the second time that I've looked at this since the first time I had a family constellation done with Michelle Masters in fall of 2010. So it's been almost 8 years.
Okay.
And it just all of what I've gone through since then just had a renewed appreciation for the kafakta, of the situation, just the fuckness of the situation.
So maybe you're a little raw today, bringing that present.
But I'm okay.
Of course you are.
Yeah. So
Okay, thank you. Call on someone else, Guy. And again, if you get called on, you can say pass and just call on the next person.
Yeah. I was thinking we talked about study group last night. So really missed Christina and Peter, although it's good to be with everyone who was there. Yeah, we were squirrely. Not surprising, right? And there was definitely some, like, what are we doing? Why are we doing that? Well, I have a different idea. Sorts of things happening. And, you know, so, I mean, I think we're actually good with dealt with it reasonably well. We've named things, and we did an exercise to say, okay, we're feeling like horses pulling in different directions, so let's just embody that. But we even were having disagreement about, well, like, aren't we supposed to be doing like constellations with a facilitator and like, you know, with people representing? And isn't that what the study group is about? And so there's all this, like I said, swirling. So, it settled down more by the end of the night, but there's definitely. Aren't you glad you missed it? No, I mean it was valuable. It was another step in the, you know, the group formation, right? So
And how are you?
There's layers. There's the part of me that's always like, yeah, okay, I can bless that and all its messiness. Then there's like the deeper emotional. So the study group stuff, I feel like doesn't really bother me. It's just like, yeah, you know, we're a group, we're forming, we're storming, forming, etc. But even hard to find words. Very emotional underneath. I got this huge tax bill Tuesday, and I have all these feelings about it. Like, I think I've let go of a lot of the self-blame, you know. But it's still like, you know, I screwed up, I didn't manage that, you know, and oh fuck, you know, what should I do about this? And what do I do going forward? You know, how can I even live here? But, you know, I share custody of my son, so how can I not live here? So, yeah, I'm going to need, well, and I will get support for answering some of those questions and putting numbers on it. But yeah, very emotional. Trying to separate it from questions of, you know, my self-worth. This is a crazy expensive place to live. That's not my fault. So, yeah. Anyway, it's very emotional. Thank you, Amy.
Would you call on the next person? And again, anyone can pass.
It's not on it.
Jean, my little cinematography director.
Centric frame.
Well, I shared the information from the Constellation we did last night. So, no, I mean, I guess there are a few people here. So I don't know if I should go through it again.
Just say the Cliff Notes version of just you know, a few sentences worth for the people who weren't there in Fulker.
Okay, well, we started Constellation, whatever that was, and then followed up with Leslie on a coaching call, and some things came out. Christina represented a wound of some sort in the family, and that apparently was my father. He died of a massive heart attack, so maybe that's why you were feeling it. And
When you were 15.
right,
Yeah.
And he was tending to be in front of me, and Leslie moved him to behind me, and the client, they had a representative for a client, and they seemed to like that better. I think that's about all. Personally, kind of business as usual. Some emotionally confusing situations going went to a memorial for a friend of another different group that died a while back. That seemed to kick off, even though we were really close, it seemed to kick off strange stuff. But I don't know what else. I think that's about all that's been going on.
Thanks, Jeff. Call on the next person.
So really, since the last class here, where I had a constellation that opened up a whole can of worms, it's like been the next kind of phase of big chunk of work for me around my mom and my family. And as you know, my mom's got dementia and has been in my charge for like the last 6 years after my dad died. And I've come from feeling like something will work out, I'll take care of it, it'll be fine, to I cannot do this by myself. And actually like opening up to the rest of the family, while also feeling immense waves of grief and pain and hurt on an almost crippling basis that I've been avoiding for the last 5 years, 6 years. So it's all kind of coming up now, which is probably perfect timing. And at the same time that I'm feeling this, the stuff with my situation with my mom's gotten worse. She got violent with a caregiver who's also my mother-in-law. It was the first time anything like that has happened. And both like an amazing victory and also like a what the fuck. Like I finally for somehow was able to look at the numbers and find something that makes sense to actually be able to care for her for the rest of her life. And the only way that works is if she leaves her home, which is the only thing she doesn't want to do, generally. And the one thing I felt like I could not do, like the terror of like, not being there for her, not showing up in a particular way, or having her possibly be mad at me, all that stuff. So stuff is moving, but it's a kind of intense in here. And Leslie will be facilitating my constellation next Sunday, 6:30. This will be interesting. I'm not touching anything in here this weekend. I'm just
Give your system a break.
letting stuff percolate. Other than all of that, I feel like I'm surviving. I'm doing okay. Got a new bed, and I'm here. So that's where I'm at.
Thanks.
And
Next.
I am just in a period of my life, which seems to be somewhat ongoing, where I'm like constantly reforming myself at work and like, what is my work? This week was an audit that I was kind of leading, so that's why I couldn't be here last night. I would have rather have been here, despite like challenges. I much would have rather been here.
What Amy describes as more fun than an audit.
Yes. Which just shows you the direction I should be taking with my work. So, things have happened since the last time we had a weekend together. Actually, in a nutshell, I tried to quit my job at one point, which was I was really excited. And then when I didn't fully go through with it, it was like, oh my God. Because I don't want to not have a job, So a lot of turmoil with that. But I'm just like peeling off the layers of like, okay, what is right and what is not right with what's going on right here, so I can like reform in the shape of what's right. And the latest revelation, which I've always known, is that I'm not being creative at work. And that is like a huge missing piece. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about right now. There's a lot of pieces there, but that's what's current. And I'm thinking about, I'm going to have another meeting with my boss this week about like what's really happening next. And I'm going to propose that I miss a bunch of time this summer to do like spiritual workshops and personal growth stuff. So we'll see how that goes. Shanvi.
Okay. It's odd to go back to Taos after being in these workshops because it's a different bubble of time. And I just got Angwin St. Just's book on fractals and trauma. And it's like, okay, I think that's helpful because the kind of trauma that is under everything in Taos that I can't get a grip on is because I'm trying to approach it from a linear place. Okay, that's that. So I'm having trouble with finding a way to be of service to really old cultures that are in trauma.
Mm.
But that's an interesting way to break out of my thinking. And I just said, finally, I'll let people come to me, see who runs across my path. And immediately a wonderful Hispanic young woman poet whose passion pours out of her beautifully and clearly appeared, and I made a connection with her. And I haven't said yet, by the way, I want you to come work with me. But we made an amazing connection. Then the next thing was an Indian, an Apache, not a Taos Indian, which is a big distinction right there. But long hair, ponytailed, golf pro, hairdresser, looks gay, I'm not sure. But good, nice, clean energy, and immediately wanted to know more about my stuff. I went, okay, so I don't know where they're going to come from, but I got to stop thinking I can go and, force a connection. I just have to open up to the connections there. So, I have another workshop that I'm going to be giving end of the month. And I came close to quitting that job and letting go of the office and the building where I do those workshops after the last round where I got nobody to show up. And I thought, I'm just going to give this physical place up. And I went, well, that's going to be a real pain in the ass to move everything. And I said, well, okay. In business, you need to kind of have a plan. I'm not a good business planner, but I do know that you can't suddenly close shop and then reopen. So I got the shop open. Don't know exactly what I'm selling, but I did put together this website, which I mentioned last night, which I'm working on, and she's helping me refine. And personally, my partner has gone off to 5 weeks of complete silence, which is very emotional for me. And I tried to get 10 minutes a week on the phone as an arrangement and could not get it. And I thought, there's some perfect bliss for her in that, and perfect isolation for me. So it's good to be around people who are talking about things I care about. I don't have people to talk about constellations in Taos. Not much. So good to be here.
Thank you, everybody. Call on Arena,
Irina.
and then Arena will call on Folker.
All right.
So one of the things that came out during meditation was that I always had since childhood, I always had a disdain for farmer's work. I was just like, it's not bad. Like as a little kid, it was really interesting, and a lot of my family is farmers. I come from farmers. So, but I always like royal blood. I don't know where I got this from, but I imagine myself being like a royal blood something. So when I realized that when you said that, it doesn't have respect, so I don't have respect for farmers' work. So I want to name that right now, and eventually get to a place where I do, where you say yes to that, and that's reflects a process that I have, that I want to say yes to everything, but yet I still have a lot of no's. internal no's to things, and so I want to say yes to no's. If that makes sense.
Only because present company.
Yeah, and like last night, like things weren't happening. Like I wanted something, and like even named that it wasn't happening. There's maybe we're still not feeling like safe with each other because I went to Vislaga's workshop. You know, Yelena was here in March, so I went to her workshop, and it was like wonderfully deep, which I like because of Russian, you know. And I was like, I'm gonna come to a Friday group, and it's gonna be deep work, and we all just like, you know, we were not going there because of a variety of reasons for us. And I was like, internally. And so it's like, I want to say yes, but I'm saying no, so I'm saying yes to that. That is the response that I had. So, and what else? And I do want to facilitate this weekend or next weekend because sadly I'm not going to be here in June. I'll try to join on
Zoom, yeah.
Zoom, yeah, but I'm not going to be able to physically Constellate, and it is important to me by the end of the training that I'll get practice.
Okay.
And I really want to do this work, and I'm still really like, every time I do this, I'm like, I can't do this, I don't know what's going on, you know, the whole thing. So it's just more practice. Hopefully get to practice with friends or acquaintances too. So that's my space. And personally, I'm doing well. There was a retrograde, Mercury retrograde this week. So I've been feeling it this far, but it's almost done. So, yeah. And springtime is coming. So it's,
Cool. After a year and a half of scraping the bottom of the barrel, I want to say like 2 months ago, a little miracle happened. And my general state of well-being has dramatically changed within maybe a course of 2 or 3 weeks. And I'm still holding my breath. It's like, really? This is possible? And apparently it's very possible. Because it's not dipping much, it's just where so that's very good news. I just finished a workshop, like corporate training 3 days ago, where the big theme was how do we organize self-organizing teams? What is the leadership? What does leadership look like in the context of self-organizing work, where managers are not supposed to tell people what to do? That one. That was the workshop. Which is beautifully aligned with constellations in general. And the way we're trying to explain this to technical managers, we call it sense and respond. Very much what we do as facilitators. And then do some exercises to actually give these people some experience of what that feels like. And in general, so professionally, I have been looking for more and more entryway into leadership work. And have sort of toss things up in the air. So fuck it, it's not working. And then it starts to come in, which was like saying yes to the nose. It's like that kind of felt like that. So I'm like, okay, something's working. We're right in the ways. I think that's it.
Okay. Then I will check in as well. Most of you know that I had a really blissful trip in Australia. That was, 3 weeks of mostly, being my best self. If you, once a day you're your best self, and you kind of do that for several days in a row, you're like, whoa, this is what life could be like. But it's easier with kookaburras and 85 degrees and oceans to swim in. I mean, let's just admit it. It's easier.
Yes.
So it's been rough since I've gotten back. It's been tough. I don't believe in Mercury retrograde, and I've had the Mercury retrograde from hell. See, I have a new computer that doesn't work properly. And because it's refurbished, I can't return it in a straightforward, easy kind of way. And I had to get a new printer. And it's just, life has, I've actually ended up doing some NLP on myself. And the meaning underneath it, the imprint underneath it was life doesn't work. I've been running that pattern for the last 4 weeks or so. Including my own, I got about 2 weeks in, I was like, life's like this. Hey, I've told you guys, don't take a technology breakdown personally. You get them twice a year. And I was like smooth as glass for the first 2 weeks. And then I went cranky. I'm just on record now, I'm cranky. So that's kind of what it's been like. And I've been overworking, because you know how it is when you come back from a long trip away, and you're self-employed. And early this week, I realized I don't think these guys want me to show up on Saturday feeling the way I feel right now. So I took a really nice day in Point Reyes yesterday. It was glorious. It was so beautiful. I found this little cove. It's one of my favorite coves. I just sat there for about 3 hours and didn't do much. It was so beautiful out there. It was a little chilly, but it was so beautiful. So I come to much restored, and that's really on my mind, is how lovely that was to be out there. And that it's funny, it's about wellness and taking care of yourself, but sometimes you got to apply it as a discipline. It's like you kind of got to make yourself, even though you're thinking, I got a million things to do and I can't possibly take a day off, but I'm like, I gotta take some time off. So that's kind of me, where I am right now. I am also, interestingly, in conversations with some Australia folk about going back next spring and teaching some more. Some of you have experienced my work on alternative lives, and I taught that there, and that got people really, really excited. And now I'm chewing on a whole soul retrieval, initiation, following trauma, alternative life. There's something in there that I could actually spend 2 or 3 days doing, that's beginning to emerge. So that's kind of exciting at a sort of professional level. We're not having conversations now, and they're not like, oh, well, we meant it then, but now we're not so into it. So, that kind of cooling off that happens after an enthusiasm, that's not happening. So it seems like there's a good chance that's going to happen in the spring. So that makes me happy. I want to name that as part of the exercise, you mentioned mathematicians, and I realized, and I had named my father's work as businessman, but I realized, he would have been so sad to hear that, because he was actually a mathematician. So I just want to, in honor of my father, name he was a mathematician. That's how he saw himself. So just wanted to catch that. And I just want to name wow, that sharing was amazing, guys. Wowzers, awesome.
I skipped one part of the work that my grandparents did, which was laundry.
Laundry.
This was, the 2 classic things that Chinese people can do:
Yeah.
laundry and restaurant. constant.
Yeah. A lot of respect for that, right?
I missed one too. Military.
Mm.
Oops.
The day after we bombed Syria, right? Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we'll have blind spots about this stuff, right? So it may pop up over the day. And then I just offer up, Volker in a moment is going to ask you guys what you're up to, but I hear one desire floating that is organizational that over the course of the weekend might be useful. So I'm just going to write it down so we don't lose it, is to look at what's going on with study groups.
Totally.
That's an organizational issue,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
And it actually connects with Volker's interest in how does leadership happen in self-organizing
Yeah, that's
groups.
good.
Oh my
Because it's
God.
what is our study group is. It's supposed to be a self-organizing group.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I just named this is something we might look at some point. Yeah. And then the last thing I just want to say, I don't want to move into a lot of wonky left brain, but is there a really concrete question about constellations that's been on your mind that will drive you nuts if we don't deal with it now? Let's do that now, and then I'll turn it over to Volker. But I don't want to do a fulsome re-check-in on that, but if there's something you really got to, yeah.
I just have one brief thing.
Yeah.
Did Constellation night on Tuesday and had a brand new rep. And I could not for the life of me discern whether the crazy that was happening, which was mostly just sort of not particularly taking direction and getting like moving around an awful lot, and all of that was more the role or more the rep, and just kind of when you get the sense is that the rep who's new is not necessarily fully aware of the impact that their actions are having in the whole system when they're more like just doing and not asking before they do.
Yeah.
Even when you've outlined that you prefer it if they do it another way. How to hold that and work with it even while in the constellation.
It's hard. I just named that. It's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard.
And in that instance, I kind of did both. Like, okay, well, this is up, so I'm going to treat it like it's the role and include it in some capacity, and also recognize that this person is probably not going to like me when I tell them to not do what they're doing. But just curious, what any guidance on helping guide representatives? And that's probably a big question, big topic, but that was just what's out.
Yeah. I think I'm not going to dive into that question now because we've done it a bit in the past, and let's do it more. And Volker may end up doing his hit on this, which would be more useful than hearing it from me again. What I do want to say is want to honor that that's a tricky bit of facilitating, and that it's one of those. Many times last week, and I said that's one of those gray areas. That's one of those gray areas. That's one of those gray areas where there isn't one set, like, oh, in this situation you need to really exercise control, and in this situation you really got to let it go. And my guess is if I had been there, I would have said, Peter's managing this pretty well. And it does it's a stance thing. It's a funny kind of. Am I on both my feet right now with the group? So I really want to honor that. That can be tricky. And if Volker wants to add a few words on that, he can. But if no one else has anything else technical, I think I want to turn it over to him. Yes?
Just a real quick one. This kind of came up, the question of, what's included in constellations. Is there such a thing as like pure constellations? And so I tend to be fine with throwing lots of things in that are looking at things, different ways to do, exercises, and maybe it doesn't look like there's a facilitator, and there's always some kind of representation going on. But yeah, I came up last night, and I just realized I feel very free to do what might look like an NLP style exercise, and that's me. That's still constellation work. You're still looking at what is and working with that. So I don't know, something about that.
Yeah.
What is important about this difference?
I'm sorry?
What's important about knowing the difference? What is or isn't included in constellation work?
Well, I think I'm not worried about it for myself, but it came up as more of a group thing, when we were trying to figure out what we were doing. you know.
So
Yeah.
Yes.
it was a control mechanism, not necessarily that the distinction was important, is what I'm hearing from you.
Yeah, you know, so I was wondering whether it's somewhere between, it's maybe more of a declaration for me than a question.
Yeah,
of,
yeah.
I feel that constellations can include a lot of things that may not look like classical constellations.
Right, and
So-
just to name that, you guys get to decide that for yourselves about what gets included or not included.
Okay.
And we do understand at study groups there might be agreements about what belongs or doesn't belong in terms of the activity, and that goes back to this question about what you agreed to on that. Because if you have different understandings about what we're up to tonight, then of course it's going to cause some stress in the group.
Yes.
Yeah, and I had because I've had this objection to that, because for me study group is like using people. Like
Right.
the representation more constellation. That's for me, and everything could be constellation work, but that's for me what study group was.
Right.
So
So
that's the agreement.
so there's two questions here.
expectation.
What belongs in constellations? And I think we all agree kind of anything, depending upon what you decide, and what belongs in study group, which is part of what we spent a while last time pounding out a little bit. And maybe we need, I don't know if you ended up writing up those notes and setting them out.
I should have. I did write up all those notes, and as I'm hearing this, I'm thinking like, oh, well, this is the difference between being self-governing and as a group collectively deciding what is to be included.
Right.
Or just following the facilitator, which would eliminate the problem because the facilitator is going to tell you what's included. You know.
Right. Exactly. Right. So, if you could share those notes at some point with everybody, including me and Folker, because I didn't see those notes and I don't remember what you all decided last time anyway. And then see if refinements are necessary. And in a moment like that, to be able to say, oh, we weren't specific about this, rather than, it becoming a power struggle around what's right here, it becomes, oh, so on the one hand, there is awareness that we did say that the facilitator could do what the facilitator wants. And then, but wait a second, aren't there even some limits there? And how do we work that out? Okay. So I think as part of whatever Folker's going to lead us through this weekend, that can be refined a little bit as well. And the question of why, when these arise, does it get a little sticky in the room? Rather than finding a easy way to work itself out, right? So I really want to turn this over to Folker now. So.
I gotta run to the bathroom.
Okay, we're going to have a bathroom break.
Oh my God.
How did you do that in the business world? And so this right here might be useful just as a distinction that we start to get a feel for. And there's this cognitive thinking mode. And right now we were very much at the cognitive thinking level conversation. Make rules and agreements and the facilitator this and this role and that role and these, versus sort of the embodied way of knowing. In constellations is very much a different way of knowing. That's why in the business context, I only do blind constellations. It's on index cards in somebody's person's pocket so that their conceptual understanding of a role or a job or whatever does not interfere. And these are with people who have no practice, explicit practice. So they need that kind of crutch. And maybe just an invitation here for us this weekend to just practice making that distinction for yourself and noticing from which place of knowing are you operating. Are you in your head, in the cognitive, analytical, intellectual mind, or you're in your body and sort of on a somatic way of knowing? And for me, that includes both the heart and the gut. So 3 brains. Gray matter, the heart, and the gut. And And culturally, we so ignore everything below the neckline, and that's at our own detriment. And the fascinating piece is the higher up you get in an organization, the more people operate from the neck below, because they're continually operating on not enough information. They don't actually know what's going on, so they have to feel and sense into what's going on and filter out all the bullshit that comes towards them. And people deliver reports and make recommendations. And as an executive, you're always looking at that like, okay, they're selling me on something. What's really going on? And if they're any good, and they're operating out of their gut most of the time while they're rationalizing stuff and, you know, maintain appearances. So when you come to like really senior people with constellations, they're like, oh my God, finally, okay, we can actually acknowledge what's going on. I've never had language for it. All right, so I just thought I'd jump in at that level because it was up also in terms of how you are with each other and stuff. Yeah, that distinction of what level, what place of knowing are we coming from? And then we'll have some trust about it. All right. I don't know how much introduction introducing myself. We'll check who has background in NLP. Just in terms of assumption. So for the last 10 years or so, I've specialized in organizational constellations, building on my work as fundamentally, I help software companies change the way they do project management. That's the business stream. And along the way, got into facilitating leadership training and leadership development. And that's where I feel myself coming into my best. And I had this spectacular opportunity provided to subcontract for a company in Boston, Mobius Leadership. And they do a lot of work with global professional services, like, you know, the big four consulting companies, or the big four. Who doesn't want to? And so I show up on 5-day residential leadership retreats. Very senior people, like, you know, they have conversations with CEOs, the Russian subsidiary and the European business unit. They don't get along, and the reports aren't timely, and they're playing games, and headquarters in the US, and these kind of conversations where they're in the middle and having to negotiate, and often find themselves at the short end of the stick. Because internally, the people have way more leverage than you as a consultant from the outside. So those kinds of constellations. Or the one I loved was working with the one of the Saudi queens. She's in her 30s. She's working in the educational sector, trying to get more girls into schools. So the family is Harvard trained. So the royal family is Harvard trained and very Western, and they're working with these very conservative religious groups and having to figure out how to make that work culture. So big picture, big system constellations. And every time I do it, I just admire the depths of those consultants. That they're willing to even take on that thing. Pretty impressive. I do a lot of one-on-one executive coaching. 360, normal leadership development stuff. And now sort of branching into that how do you lead in self-organizing teams and really help software companies make more sense out of it.
Question.
Yeah.
Is it okay to ask questions?
Absolutely. I just want, yeah.
Yeah. Who hires you in software company? Is it the HR person or is it a senior person themselves? How does it happen for a company to hire?
Usually it comes from a VP of engineering or CPO. And it's part of a larger initiative of going from traditional software development to agile software development. And HR hears about it later.
Okay.
That was a particular challenge in the setup.
Okay. Do you have a background in software at all? Or no? Yeah. Okay.
My background is, I started as a user interface designer before that was in the 90s, where a bunch of engineers were looking at me like, what are you doing in this room? Oh, you're drawing pretty pictures. How cute.
Yeah.
And I did that I did a lot of custom software development for medium-sized businesses, 50 to 100 million, 200 million, where they needed to consolidate 25 spreadsheets into one application that touched every department. And I was the guy to find out what the software should do. So that got me into organizational development because I discovered the more upfront conversations I had, the less software we ended up writing. If you just get people to talk, a lot of the problems they're trying to solve go away naturally. Versus us having to write software to help fix the problem. And that's when I said, like, okay, I'm done doing software. I enjoy the conversational part. I happen to manage software project with a big pain in the butt. I'm done with that.
Yeah. And you started doing Constellation right away, or you had like transition?
I started with Constellations in 2000 in response to my divorce and the realization that there was something going on that I had that was so surprising to me that, and my focus initially was on family constellations. And it was with a little bit of luck, really, that I got into organizational constellations. Gunther Weber showed up here, then I went to Holland for a week, and then I realized how much it relates to my work. And that totally shifted how I did software consulting. Once that dawned on me, I was like, oh my God. Now I know what we're doing.
So you had software consulting practice as well, and then you ended up merging. Oh, okay, that's cool.
Yes. So a couple of these independent strands, and for a while they looked very independent, and then I realized, like, oh no, they go to. And it's been a 15-year process. It wasn't obvious. All right, does that give you a pretty good sense for me? Great. Cool. So, what are you hoping for? What will make this valuable for you?
Can you turn the camera? Sorry.
We can turn it back on in a little bit.
Yeah.
The ambient noise over on this side is a little tricky.
Yeah.
And managing the temperature of this room is always hard because the windows don't open. So we'll just keep working on it.
Yeah.
I think it would be really nice to get a sense of the distinctions you're making in an organizational constellation when we're like that are different from family constellations. Like, what are we looking? I mean, aside from just how does one facilitate organizational constellations, what are the distinctions we're making? The orders of
We'll start there.
Organizational,
yeah. That's the first thing we're going to do. What else?
I'm just looking forward to seeing and hearing about some applications of it, like possibilities. Maybe we'll call it possibilities.
I'm curious about how you mentioned how you talk about it, how you explain. Because imagine the VP guy doesn't necessarily know about the field.
Translations.
Yeah, translations. Just that connection that you make from the field to like a normal human who works on a software company. It's like two different worlds for me.
I had a moment like that just a week ago where like, wow, I don't, like for this person, I don't even know where to start. Yeah, there's a lot of tap dance.
Okay. You're going to teach us how to tap dance? Awesome.
I'm interested too in how you get into heart and gut work with people who are in a hierarchy and, you know, maybe don't necessarily feel, well, you said you work mostly with higher level, but
Yeah.
they're with people they wouldn't necessarily be open with, you
Yes.
know?
Yeah. Safety.
Yeah.
So that just that's a really.
I'm always interested in the question of what do resolutions look like in organizational constellations, and how is that different from family constellations? So resolutions.
I guess maybe even just like even probably in the possibilities or whatnot, the distinctions and differences and the different. You mentioned still within an organization, but you're also talking about like Russia, Europe, and America. The zoom lens sort of on like what scale can look like in these, you know, at one point you're looking at like societal everything constellations that are actually these multinational corporations that are one flavor, and you know the UN is another flavor.
So I refer to that as nested systems. Perfect.
And with that, it's almost like it's a macro level constellation, and at the same time, you deal with humans. So they bring in, you know, they work with Russia, but they bring in dad into that. And so I've read some of that, and I think there was
Can we just post them?
I
Or-
don't think I have tape.
Okay,
That's fine.
keep track. Okay.
Yeah.
Don't worry about
I
it.
think the article said that you don't get into family. So I'm interested in like how you manage to be macro, but also go micro. Does it make sense? Like,
So just so the blended constellations, meaning
Yeah.
family and
yeah, like family stuff comes up. What do you do? Do you put it on the shelf and say, okay, we're gonna deal with that, or you go into it?
so that blended constellations, it goes directly to contract.
What are we here to do?
What is our agreement around what are we doing?
Okay.
And that determines fundamentally, how we're managing that question.
I'm curious about how you apply this in situations that are culturally so different as in, say, tribal councils or matriarchal Native American governance and non-hierarchic, non-business models, non-international, but just like things that have been here all along that are not getting exposure to white people's systems at all. Tribal council, women,
So tribal or sort of
Running
alternate
things.
structured
yeah,
Yeah.
there we go.
systems.
And just to off of the blended constellations, since most of the people in the room are probably more interested in family constellations ultimately, what wisdom or tools from organizational constellations can we integrate in, if any, into a more typical family constellation kind of a context? How does that open,
So
make something more possible?
So how do I capture that? like learning or implications for family?
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Perfect. I mean, there are times, just for instance, something that happens not infrequently. My interview will reveal that there was a piece of land that was really important to the family, and its loss still reverberates. Now we're a little bit more in organizational sort of ways of thinking about the family. So being on the lookout for things that we might not see just through a family frame. So yeah, implications for family is a good way to summarize that.
I mean, a lot of that shows up, say, through inheritance or trust.
Yes.
You know, sort of where the family business and the family overlap.
Very rich territory.
But it's often not interpreted that way because it's like an old story. We had a boarding house that burned down and we lost it, and it was very sad for the family. It's not being posed as a business or organizational issue. So how to be on the lookout for it.
I'm curious about how you sort of gather the information that you're going to work on. Like in the family constellations, we would interview a client, but I'm assuming that in organizational constellations, there's not one focused person that's going to tell the whole story for everyone. So I imagine there's like a lot of moving parts of people's perspectives.
So that really sort of is also like context. So
Stakeholders.
Format by context or something. Because again, that has a lot to do with contracting.
Yeah.
Okay. Good starting point.
Let's do it all now.
So basic differences, fundamental differences. I mean, the first one is any way we organize outside the family, we organize around a result, an outcome, a shared purpose. Whether that is church and volunteer work or activist movements, political activist movement, where the political action is the motivating factor, or a business where it's making money, serving customers. There always needs to be an organizing cause. Otherwise, the system will just disintegrate. Like I have a bunch, I'm part of a bunch of learning communities. We had great workshops. We were all excited. We thought we had, a new set of best friends. And the bulletin board is silent. There's no reason to communicate. We have nothing other than, there's nothing in common. There's just no lifeblood. So what often happens, the general pattern in organizational constellations is you start with the core dynamic within the people or the systemic structure. You just look at, how are these people getting along? Or how are these organizational units getting along? And then at some point, you need to add the purpose of the business or the outcome or the result or the goal. Otherwise, you will never come to a resolution or anything that looks close to it. Because fundamentally, we organize around the outcome. That's why we're there. If we don't care about the outcome, we're in the wrong place. Yeah, and we will leave. It's just, why bother? So I'm hoping that we'll see that pattern. Yeah, we'll start with the relationship pattern, and then relatively quickly we add something generic like outcome or goal. purpose?
I mean, it's occurring to me right now. I mean, thank you. I think it just feels very powerful to hear that named, because it's so almost in the background that you don't even really think about it. Because if you think about it, well, yeah, like a family wouldn't stick together if it weren't for the fact that the shared result is, in the case of the two parents, a relationship to begin with.
Or life goes on.
Or
Some version
but then
of life
right,
goes on.
well, first it's a relationship. Then it becomes, if there's a child, then it's the shared purpose is the child. You know, then it becomes the shared purpose is the family, right? But it's like that there is a shared purpose, that there is aligned. I mean, it's obvious, it's a duh, but to just kind of have it named, especially in the context of like when you're looking at organizational constellations, that is illuminating. So, okay, cool.
So in terms of your study group, be clear about the purpose that brings you together. Are you in alignment about why you're getting together? I remember in the early 90s, when the internet just started to take off, everybody wanted to build a community, because that was a way of creating some stickiness on the web, where that all felt so ephemeral that nobody knew what to do with it. And most of those communities didn't have a shared purpose. There was, Target wanted to have people come back to the website, and so they wanted a community. It did not work. Until someone actually stated, like, there's no community without a shared purpose, and then most of them started to go away because it was so obvious that there wasn't a shared purpose. All right. The second big difference is that in organizations, our belonging is conditional. In family, our belonging is, whether you like it or not, given. There's no way out. So in every other organizational system, we enter the system and we exit the system. And there are conditions. I provide my time, my effort, my skill, I get some pay in return, there's some balance of giving and taking, and at some point my contract is over and I leave. There's no problem leaving the system if it's done halfway clean. If you have massive layoffs and everybody gets shameful about it, and then you have ghosts. So there's definitely ways of messing it up. But so, fundamentally, we enter and we leave. And there are conditions for that. Our contribution, what we give and take, it's up front and center to our belonging. And then the last one is so apparently not quite. So, a lot of the belonging pieces too, like certainly in the tech industry, and when we talk about multinational companies, the team in India doesn't get its appropriate place, because headquarters is in the US or somewhere in Europe. The whole colonial mindset is still alive and well. And all that is now playing out in business and global businesses. And people are not respected and honored appropriately. So that piece still goes with what we know from family constellations.
Excuse me.
And they're still based on contracts and agreements and business units, the legal structures. I mean, the surprising piece is that somehow the field knows about the human invention of legal structure. It's a complete cultural, like having a legal entity like a corporation is a cultural invention.
But the field registers that. It's a template for the corporation.
Yes.
Got it.
Now, see, if I think about it in terms of like, oh yeah, family constellations, it's also natural. It's so built into what it means to be a mammal. It's natural.
A group.
A group, a family, a tribe. Yeah, this is all very natural in hundreds of thousands of years. And 300 years ago, somebody decided we'd create a legal structure that we call a corporation, and it registers.
Do you get distinction like in the differences in, say, maybe trade regulations in one part of the world than another as far as how maybe things relate? Like, does it get that specific, or is it more?
It's weird.
Yeah.
And we will hopefully get some opportunities to go into structural constellations, which are essentially watching the field responding to logical perceptual structures that we make up.
But it was about belonging, the previous point. So it's belonging is conditional. I was just struggling remembering myself in different organizations. It's just a very different flavor of belonging for me. Like in my family, I also struggle with belonging to that. Maybe it's a pattern. But it's like, yeah, there's no way out. You have to deal with it. But with the organization, I don't know. Now I'm thinking maybe it's my personal pattern because I actually never felt like I belonged to organization. So I'm projecting that. Okay. Is it ever clear? I feel like a person will always project their belonging onto organization as a family. So the pattern will. Okay.
100%.
Okay. So if I never belong to my family, I can never belong to an organization.
Very unlikely.
Okay.
That you would extend to an organization what you don't know at your baseline.
Mhm.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I mean, like, so orphans then, very challenging to work in organizations.
Well, Volker, what's going through my mind are the other kinds of belonging that people sometimes have, like the tech industry, the sense of belonging of being software and tech in Silicon Valley. There's a sense of belonging to that identity, or the identity of being a school teacher and navigating the public school system, or what cults do, which is kind of say, we'll be the mom and dad you never had, and create that sense of idealized family. There's so many different levels of belonging we have with these organizations that ultimately come down to conditions and contracts. We get other belonging meaning from it, which makes things tricky.
Not particularly. So fundamentally, organizational constellations are not as emotional as family constellations. We're just not that hooked in. Yeah, families go straight to survival. Companies, it's an income, it's survival based, but we have some experience that we can get an income somewhere else. Yeah, not as emotional. All the big emotions that show up in organizations are family based. It's someone acting out their relationship to their parent, or some abandonment issue or something. I mean, that's, and then we have, we've talked about nested systems earlier, where I belong to this company. I'm a software engineer, so I belong to the Geek Squad. And I'm German, so I belong to Germany, and you know, I'm human, so I'm global. And the bigger the system I calibrate to, the smaller the juice.
Smaller the juice.
Yeah.
Emotional. Yeah.
Emotional. The emotional connection to me being an employee of company X is different than me saying, you know, I'm part of the group of user interface designers or I'm a techie. Like, yeah, sort of. Is there a lot of belonging juice there? Kind of. So yeah, the broader we make that umbrella, the less juice we encounter. And
So-
that's, you know,
People substitute for their families, though. Like I'm
absolutely.
noticing people with a license plate that
The-
says
the
tech writer,
repetition
for
of the
example.
pattern.
Mhm.
You know?
The way we do anything is the way we do everything. So the repetition of the pattern is uncanny and to be expected.
So, yeah, so when you say juice, like emotions, the most emotions are, you know, with respect to belonging that is more at the level of family and survival and all of that. That's where there's more emotional juice. And then as you get bigger and
And
bigger,
stronger entanglements.
stronger entanglements.
So the kind of identification that we're dealing with in the family system,
Yeah.
are much stronger than what we see in organizations.
And do you see sort of say more community social agency, like more like family style organizations like churches or communities have more of those kinds of charge? And I don't know what your experience is with those particularly, but would they have more emotional charge if it's say like a community of people living together, for example, who are not necessarily family, but they are
Roommates.
roommates. Yeah, so I'm sure there's some charge in that.
Yeah.
But even church, like a church, you know, I don't imagine that it would have a slightly different flavor than, say, like a business. Although if it's a family business, then we've got other layers in there too.
I don't know how much reference I have. My gut feeling around it is, as an activist, I show up because it's my personal sense of purpose and my personal passion. That's a different motivation than showing up at work where, you know, I like my work, but I'm making an income. That's a different motivation. So the passion-driven volunteerism that we would find in churches or activist groups is closer to the family dynamic than I'm showing up for work and I have a title and a desk.
That's a nice distinction.
It's interesting because I'm thinking of my own situation and how I show up for work and have a title and a desk. And for me, it's very emotional because it feels like it's not connected, you know?
I'd love to look at that. Particularly, it's not connected. Part.
Yeah.
Sounded interesting right there.
Don't get me started. We will be.
This will be our first organizational constellation.
Yeah.
All right. We have a goal. Belonging is conditional. And order is calibrated differently. So in the family system, we just look at the birth date and we understand the order. Whoever came first or before, yeah, gets present. In constellation, in organizations, that's a bit more convoluted. So there's definitely the special role of the founder that is never changing. Yeah, whoever started the organization sort of has a special place for the lifetime of the organization. Other than that, seniority matters. Seniority in the sense of, you know, whenever somebody joined and how long they've been there. But seniority is a little different from, say, in a hierarchical sense. Where am I in the hierarchy? Yeah. If, like the gardener who's making sure the lawn is cut, even though they may have been there for 20 years, has a different weight in the system than the CEO who joined 6 months ago.
I wonder what it would look like for Apple when Steve Jobs left and then came back, right? You know.
Absolutely. Yes.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah, so he always had a position, basically.
Yeah. As a founder, in general, and so by force of his personality in particular. So,
Bless you.
I mean, the other day, somebody challenged me about, stupid executives. And I'm like, yeah, and if you're willing, like if your decision is affecting 30,000 people, that's a different way of sleeping at night than if you're making sure the lawn is cut. And whether the CEO whose decision, whether he's actually or she is actually aware, but fundamentally every decision that is made higher up in the chain affects more and more people's livelihood. When they run a business into the ground, thousands of people are losing jobs.
Would you consider those, like, does weight look the same in the organizational constellation? I mean, it feels like the rules of how weight in these roles are going to fluctuate based on the circumstances. But I mean, the CEO obviously will have more. I don't know, is it weight or is it something else? Authority, responsibility. I mean, it feels like, you know what I'm asking?
I think it shows up in a very similar way. So weight in, say, the family or weight amongst civilians looks like, how much shit have I had to overcome? Basically. If I've had a blessed life where everything's sort of kind of smooth sailing, and the worst that ever happened is that, the milk got spoiled in the fridge, that leaves me with a different weight than, if I'm a refugee from Syria and, help the family of 10 survive. So, same with the positional weight or burden that people are willing to take on, the higher up the organization they are.
Since when you say burden, that actually like kind of the response, the theirs to bear, sort of that. Yeah.
Yes.
Totally makes sense.
It is something to bear.
I'm noticing I have judgments about it, though. Like, I think that most of them aren't that aware of that or don't.
They're clueless.
Okay. that has been my experience.
Because we have so many layers of status symbols and ego trips and that layer on top of the fundamental baseline of it's a burden that they get very good at ignoring because it might affect them.
Yeah, you almost have to be narcissistic.
No, I disagree with that. I have plenty of examples to cover.
I'm glad to hear
You're not gonna tell us they're all fat people.
But it's a risk. It's an occupational hazard because society and culture and organizations themselves collude with that sort of the power trip, and we're inviting them into becoming egomaniacs.
I wonder what our government looks like.
Yes. So there definitely is a collusion that occurs, also where a company culture celebrates that more or less. The role of the founders and how the founder sets the tone.
I'm so curious. So the Whole Foods, not now, but he tried to have like his compensation only 14 times what the lowest person made, and it basically didn't work very well. Just a lot of pressure to not have it that way.
So there's collusion happening all over the place, and it's not so much the individual. I mean, that's part of what we're really learning in systemic work is how much we personalize and individualize problems, and how much we tend to ignore the systemic aspects and influences.
Well, and that's not accidental. I'm sorry, as the politically active oriented person, this is very much by design, because the whole capitalist sort of system works better if we are broken down into atomistic consumers who, are not thinking about, themselves from a systemic societal class perspective, but just as individual, isolated consumers. Oh, global warming? Well, buy a more efficient light bulb. There you go.
Yeah, no, I mean, okay, I actually don't want to get into that.
Yeah.
Okay. You could totally get me going.
Good to know. Okay, good.
So, in family systems, order is determined by date of birth. And in organization, it's a nebulous amalgamation of hierarchy, carrying burden, or the scope of responsibility. Seniority, how long have I been there? And skill, like contribution to the well-being of the organization. I remember 2 years back going to Canada to a software organization that had 3 founders. The businessman, the technical manager, and the resident genius. And that's kind of how they broke it out. The businessman became the CEO and ran the sales organization and balanced books. The technical guy, project manager, became the CTO and was actually managing an engineering staff of, I don't know, probably 80 to 100. And the resident genius had no spot in the org chart. He had an office in the corner. He showed up at 3 o'clock in the morning. If you wanted to meet with him, it had to be before 11 o'clock because that's when he went home. He reported to nobody, and nobody reported to him. Like he's incapable, like socially inept, to be a manager of any sort. I watched him in a meeting where we probably spent 3 hours discussing the architecture, the new architecture, and revamped the entire product into new architecture, big decision, huge investment, betting the company. And the smartest people they had in the company were sitting around the room and like going to the whiteboards. And I don't know why it waited 3 hours, but at some point the CTO asked the resident genius what he thought. And literally there was like 3 hours of flashing. And the guy writes the whiteboard and just mapped out the architecture. And after 15 minutes, the meeting was over.
Still seems important to be able to compare the two and like see where we are here and where we are here,
There were like 3 questions. But if we use Java, then we have this and this. And he just went through the next level of detail and mapped out the architecture of how he would integrate Java with that query database or whatever the question was. I was just sitting there like, that was a complete waste of time. But the guy was so shy and inept, he was just sitting in the corner until he was asked. That was literally, he was listening in and he was disagreeing the entire time. I would have gone out of my mind had I had his answer to sit still and like it would have been impossible for me.
Wow.
And he waited until he was directly asked. So
He's
this
so
person has a
powerless.
special place in the organization.
Yeah.
And based on how the conversation afterwards went, it was very clear. Everybody around the table got it. Even though organizationally, he was sort of this
Free
free
radical.
element.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, he was not really, he wasn't even listed in the org chart. He had somewhere was a circle over there. I mean, he was on the, or if you looked at the org chart, he was listed, he was included. But he was this free element just sitting to the side. Oh yeah, that's great.
Right.
We don't know what to do with it.
Well, creative spark here.
Mm.
Boom. Creative spark here. Boom.
Right,
Yeah.
right, no ties.
So did you, so I'm dying to know, as a result of your work with that company, did he get a more formalized place?
No.
No?
No, that was his place.
They just had to know how to use him, how to work
Exactly.
with him.
He was the resident genius.
Mhm.
And he had no way of leading himself and his contribution and make any meaningful decision about that. So you want him involved, you need to go to his office. And then he was very happy to share what he knows, and he was on it. He read magazines, he knew the latest technology, he learned how to code.
What was the tech person doing? I mean, he sounds tech too.
Oh yeah. He was the CTO, so he was the day-to-day manager of tech teams and sort of running the day-to-day.
Oh, okay.
Like he was the second
Whose
in
phone is
command.
going off?
That's mine.
Oh, okay.
I can turn it off.
Outed. Busted.
The resident genius calling.
Yeah.
Okay.
By the way, Mr. Long-Legged One, if you want to raise up that chair, you can do that. Just go up a few inches if you want.
All right. So those are the big distinctions that we're making. Very helpful. And that sort of, as you are looking around, or no, as you're thinking about the study group, there will be informal distinctions in your study group around the weight in the system. You amongst yourselves, even though there are no titles and there's no formal structure, there are differences in terms of your weight and sort of the informal authority that you inhabit, rightfully claim, or overreach. And that may be based on your sense of contribution in terms of knowledge, experience, background, the way you assess each other's skills, and who's, you're constantly making this evaluation, whether you pay attention to it or not. Yeah, in self-organizing groups, that happens right away. We are pack animals, so like dogs, someone is alpha, whether we acknowledge it or not. And we organize around it, like pretty much instantly. And then you can challenge alpha, and alpha may switch, depending on how you get to know, or who's learning, or someone is alpha.
I mean, that sounds like the power struggle.
Yeah.
I have such a resistance to that idea.
Yes. A lot of the conflicts that we get to experience in organizations are around authority, inhabited well or misused, and our relationship to our parents. Because that's where we learn how to be with authority.
Mm-hmm.
And if they did a halfway decent job or not, then that's what we expect from our managers, a halfway decent job or not. And then all hell breaks loose.
I say that I had a 12-year career over the company that was effectively my family, and I got to work through all of that stuff and all of the mess and all the drama until the very end, and exit that being like, I don't ever want to do that again. It was pretty intense, and I couldn't see it until I was out of it. That was,
No, fundamentally, you can assume that any job where you can stand it for any length of time is the repetition of your family. You either train people to fill important slots or you leave. If it's not similar enough to the family, then it's just a really bad place to work and you leave and you find some reason to explain that to yourself.
And any authority is your parents, basically.
Yeah.
Is it dad, mom, gender related, or like a male manager will be more, or it's not, it gets like all.
It's a little bit more skewed towards that, but that depends on your work and if you're, if you're more in a service-oriented place, then nurturing and like social services. So there are probably some distinctions in terms of the field or the industry. I mean, not the field, but the industry.
Yeah, like tech companies are more male, so they'll be more like dads figures. Okay. A lot of experiences.
So the domain, yeah, is it the intellectual domain in dad or the emotional domain in mom?
Okay.
It's super broad. Like, there's so many exceptions to this.
Yeah.
but archetypally, yeah.
Yeah, my org is run mostly by women, but it's definitely the intellectual angle. It's the father response.
Yeah.
Interesting.
if you don't stop us, we're just gonna ask you questions all the time.
So it's 10 to 12, and I wonder if it's time to do some work before we hit someone.
Probably be a good
Yes. Yes. That was good. Yeah.
idea. Christina, your situation just keeps, I don't know.
Coming out of my mouth. Yeah.
I mean, I'm just fascinated with I mean, what you just said right there, an organization of women who are nonetheless organized around a more masculine sort of value system in some perspective.
Oh yeah. Well, that's our culture.
Well, okay, but I'm just saying though, I don't work in a company run by women. I mean, there are a lot of women, but like, the CEO is a man.
You want this out of the way?
Let's move it over.
Okay, because it can just be folded back as well.
I don't know. It's interesting.
It's in the space, but we don't need it in the space.
What's your point,
All right. Who has something organizational you want to look at so we can get see this?
I will offer.
Join me.
Okay.
I don't know.
I told you it's emotional for me, so who knows what will happen.
Turns out I'm quite okay with emotions. Promise.
I always recover.
Generally, that's the case.
Yeah.
So, what's going on? How can we help?
Well, I've been at this job for 2 years-ish. I sort of fell into it a little bit. It's like basically.
So the emotion is already here. What's the emotion?
Well, the moment that is happening right now, I think.
The emotion right here. What is it? Just name it.
Feeling trapped there.
In tears. So what are the tiers about?
They're not connected to my real self, which is the lack of creativity and, you know, not really feeling like I belong there. And like I'm being something else for somebody else's benefit so that I can have money. And I don't like that.
And what I remember from earlier, sort of wanting to get out in relief that you didn't actually go through.
Well, that's what's so complicated. It's like I actually had a sort of a confrontation with my boss a couple weeks ago, and I was like, this is it. I'm gonna leave. And then I spent this whole weekend like thinking about it, like, really, can I leave? Is that okay? You know? And then I like talked myself up, like, yes, you can. You do it. And so I was like really, I felt really free and excited and, you know, all the possibilities on one hand. But then like there's a ton of fear there too, because I know what it is to be unemployed and looking. And that's painful. And very difficult for your self-esteem when you keep getting shot down, you know? So I'm very acutely aware of that. But yet I just was like, no, you can do it. You can get to the other side, you know, leave this one because you don't care about them. You know, you don't care about what you're doing. So I was like, yes, 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 I'm going to do that. And then I like had the meeting with her, and I also was like, you know, it was personal.
Yeah. So let's slow it down.
Okay.
Deep breath.
But in the end, I did not leave. I just requested to like do less hours and not go forward on this plan for me to work with her more closely.
All right, so give me a little bit more of a sense for what kind of work and like industry job and sort of who you're working with.
Working in a nonprofit, basically as like the bookkeeper, sort of accountant, which is not my thing. Yeah, but I'm good at it actually. So it's kind of this weird thing where I'm good at this, but I don't like it.
And I heard that there's some tension with your boss.
Mm-hmm.
See, she the ED?
No, in fact, the ED just resigned recently, and he actually was a man, but
The ED.
was
Executive director.
That's what I figured.
Nonprofit. That's the CEO.
You got it. I just. I mean,
sorry,
you know,
I don't
all
know the corporate world.
I mean, I knew it wasn't erectile dysfunction. You know, I just, if we could just please be explicit about the acronyms, because you know.
Yeah,
Sorry.
that's right. You guys are all here too. Okay.
What is up?
Yeah.
So
So
who are you reporting to?
the director of finance and operations.
So that's the equivalent of a COO
Yes, she would be that equivalent.
and then the executive director.
Which there's an interim person right now. Yeah.
Who else is on the executive team? Or is it really just that those two people who are leading them?
No. Well, this is actually interesting you bring this up because there is quite a robust leadership team. There is like
How big a nonprofit? Like is this Global Amnesty International style?
no,
Or
it's
5 people?
It's Outward Bound California.
Okay.
So which is an international organization, but this is California. So we have this weird tier thing going on where we are underneath of worldwide, but we are within the United States, and then we are just within California.
And so California is its own legal entity.
Yes.
a California nonprofit.
Mhm.
And how many people work just in California?
Right. Also, kind of, that's a moving target because we have like several bases where we operate out of, especially during different seasons. And so there's going to be a lot of program people, you know, when those bases are active,
Yep.
which I support.
But those are temporary jobs.
Some are like seasonal, and some are actually temporary. And then, so then in San Francisco specifically, we have sort of an admin base and a San Francisco base for the programs. And within the admin base itself, which is what I'm part of, it's like 1, 2, 3, 10, 12, something like that. But there's a lot of other people floating around and a lot of other interests.
Yes.
You know, and I should be passionate and excited about the work we do because it is good work. I mean, I believe in it, you know. It's just that my role is not really part of the good part of the work.
You've been doing this for 2 years. How do you discover your skills in accounting?
So I was like a working artist for many years, and I really wanted to get some stability in my life. And so there came a point where I got a job in a theater, but in the office, you know, and I sort of moved around there a little bit. And at one point my title was business manager. So I applied to this job at Outward Bound, California as a business manager, but I felt like I was kind of faking it, you know, because really I was more of an artist.
Yeah.
And that was enough. And then when I got in, like, it was a steep learning curve to become like their bookkeeper. And then I was like, oh, now I really am a business manager, not just at a theater.
So we'll pause. Yeah. I want to be able to just pause things as we go along so that we can have some meta, I can make some meta comments about it. So you have a pretty good sense for the emotion that's there. I'm quite familiar what the emotion is tied to, but it's there. Somewhere in the interview, and we talked about that earlier, like what we do in interviews, I want to get to the emotion. Here we started there, just because it was so close to the surface. In general, it takes a while to get to it. But even in a business context, I want some permission up front that it's okay to talk about emotions, because that's what the exercise is about. But if we can't get there, my constellation looks really different. My commitment to my client is to offer something they can actually receive. And that's one way for me to calibrate what they're receptive for. We have a pretty good sense for the nesting of the system. Yeah, US, global, California basis. And a 10, 12 person team, that's sort of the immediate system that we're paying attention to. At least at this point, that's where my attention is still. Might go up. If California is just part of a larger US dysfunction, then that's something to pay attention to. Like where does the resolution live? At what level, if at all? And that also sets the boundary of what I'm willing to set up in terms of the authority that is available in the room. So reporting to the COO, what was it? How do you name? Operations, yeah, operations manager,
Finance director.
finance director, and operations to executive director. So the 2 layers, 2 or 3 layers above in an organization. And then we start to get outside of a reasonable sphere of influence for most businesses. Depends a little bit on the culture of the business, how hierarchical they are. They're very flat organizations where that becomes mushier, but at some point, we're out of our depth. Yeah, if I'm working with an engineer at Microsoft, we're not setting up constellations about the board dynamic. It just doesn't make any sense at all.
Right.
And sometimes the resolution in an organizational context is just, it's above your pay grade. You either live with this shit or you leave. This is just outside of what you can influence. So you either find a way of dealing with it or you gotta go somewhere else. There's no resolution available. And in organizations, obviously, you hit that point way more often than you would in a family context. And sometimes we hit into secrets where suddenly the constellation stops and we can't get to the entanglement and so forth. But that's relatively rare. In organizations, you calibrate that quite carefully. What's a reasonable ambition? And then at any point, I've been through in every interview, somewhere along the line comes the question of what's a good outcome. So right now we've opened a bunch of loops, open loops. We don't have answers, and really the question becomes which of these open loops are we pursuing? So, for example, the open loop of would it help if the relationship to the boss gets better? That's an open loop. Maybe that would be the constellation. Or would it help to think about, is this the right position, the right organization, or should I leave? It's a completely different constellation. Or how am I setting up this internal tension between being an artist and being good at bookkeeping and accounting? What am I supposed to make of that? It's a very different constellation. So there are a bunch of these open loops that I'm tracking or sort of tracking. And at some point, I want to know which of these loops we need to focus on in service of.
Those are all 3 great questions.
So you get to choose. And we may want to split it into 2 parts and give you more than one option. We're actually setting up the office dynamic and the people dynamic in the office serves the learning intention of the weekend. Whether it's so important to you or not, yeah, it's a little secondary. And we can prioritize the learning experience. And then we can honor your burning desire and look at a variation on, one of those other topics. Does that make sense? Sure. So, if we just set those considerations aside for now, what would be your primary desired outcome? Like what would you want to walk away with?
What I should be doing that would fulfill.
That's fundamentally family constellation.
So you're saying choose something else?
No, I'm just thinking out loud.
I'd like to enjoy my job and not feel trapped.
Who was trapped in the family? Who had to make that choice between making a living and having a sense of fulfillment?
It's really complicated. I mean, I guess my mother, she had to raise us, you know, single mom. Kind of put her needs aside and work, the boring jobs.
You managed to set yourself up for the same conflict.
Yeah, I don't even have any kids. This is what that weekend that I was like, quit your job, do it. I was like, I do not have these same burdens. But, you know, the burden is still paying the mortgage.
And still, you have managed to set yourself up for the same dilemma. And pit it sort of passion and fulfillment, yeah, against money and security, and constructed a situation where it feels like an either or.
Yeah. This has come up before.
So, just to prove my point from earlier, work situations are only interesting to the degree that they support the experience in the family system. When there's too big a disconnect, we hightail out, whether it's too good or too bad. Yeah, if it's way better and you would find a job where you could be artistic and get well paid for, you would find a reason to get out of there like in a heartbeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could believe it.
So much well-being all at once, it's hard to take.
That sentence is a keeper.
So fundamentally, I mean,
In my comfort zone, I guess.
in a weird way,
Yeah.
you are operating in a perfect setup.
Yeah.
And that's the general rule. I mean, this is yeah. We'll get to that same place with everybody else here in the room. All right, so what would be a good thing that would come out of the constellation?
I mean, I guess making the connection between the two poles would be good for me. Having more peace with what I'm doing, as well as, you know, more options.
Okay, so I've asked the question once and then reframed, challenged, or just normalized some of the experience to see, you know, where the juice is. I'm still calibrating for the juice. What's a good way of being of service here? So the tension between doing well and doing something that's fulfilling. Shall we do a structural constellation? So in service of learning, and I don't know if this is going to be of highest impact for you, but one way, has anybody here heard of the tetralemma? Yeah. So, are we okay to go like till 1 before we do lunch?
That's when I read.
Someone's going to need to pee
Yes.
before 1.
So let me just set some context.
Going to 1 is fine, but I think some of us will need to visit the bathroom before 1 p.m.
Just like that.
So in family constellations, we mostly represent individuals, mom, dad, grandpa. Sometimes the country, sometimes the victims or the perpetrators. And that's already when we start to cluster. But mostly it's individuals. In organizational constellations, it's a lot more common to set up systems. The department, the team, the company, the customers, the market, this business unit and that business unit. Those are big systems, yeah, or depending on the situation, yeah. And so representatives in what we see or what we set up as representatives varies greatly. And then a special variation, like a sub-form of constellations, is the structural constellation.
And just to let you know, we've done a lot of constellations have had structural elements in them. So they're somewhat familiar with this already.
So
And in fact, Christina, I think, has been on the receiving end of some structural work from time to time.
what is an example of a structural
I can't remember, that's fine.
What's an example of that?
Well, we've had the client's representative in client and
Potential clients, yeah.
Yeah.
the desk representing
Oh, yeah.
her.
So that's so that is part of the earlier part of we represent different stuff.
Yeah.
And in a structure, we're actually going for logic structures. So we set up a very common one early on with business people is the business or the focus themselves or the business yet, depending on what level of abstraction we're going for. The official issue, work sucks. And the hidden issue, what's actually going on. Because the presenting problem, like you probably know by now, yeah, the presenting issue is never the problem. It's just where the symptom shows up and you're looking for the problem. So that would be one that might be, interesting. Like, the presenting problem is, yeah, I'm at a miserable job and I'm unfulfilled. That's the official story. And I hate it. And then the question is like, what's actually going on? What else do we need to pay attention to? Where that is the presenting issue. And that might be, a loyalty to mom and repeating her challenge as the official and the hidden issue. Now, for a business person, now we can have this conversation, and I don't need to set it up. Now, in a business setting, that's the constellation worth setting up. Because for them, they're so focused on solving the problem. Yeah? And like a bulldog, they've been at it for a while. So just to get them open their radar a bit, that's a powerful structure. And literally, it's a representative with the official issue and the hidden issue in the business, and you just see how they interact. And archetypally, the business ignores the official issue, is all involved with the hidden issue. Yeah, and whoever you're working with sort of realize like, oh, I've been working on the wrong construction site.
think you mentioned too, something I didn't talk about really, which was like specifically the relationship with my boss, like our dynamic. But I suspect that would come back around to the family stuff again.
For the learning part, I'm still very interested in that particular constellation. And in service of you, I'm sort of, I'm just improvising. So the structure, like one structure is, yeah, the official and the hidden issue. Another structure comes straight out of NLP where we can generically set up like the problem, the goal or the solution, the obstacle. There's a resource. There's a hidden benefit.
Need your pad?
Oh,
No, if you want it.
all right. I'll do it after.
And there's the future stuff. One, two, three, 4, 5, 6. I'm missing one. Obstacle, resource. Oh, the focus or client. So at some point, people stop using client because it sounds too therapeutical, and they use the term focus. Whoever is in the center of the focus, the center of attention.
Not the experience chain.
That's the basic structure in NLP around how you.
Hidden benefit is IPO.
Yeah, I
That
just
sort
haven't
of
seen it laid out like that.
PS,
actually-
Yeah, no, I
DS.
haven't either. I was like,
It's
So we can
using
set up-
non-NLP jargon.
Yeah.
So we can set up a constellation without any content.
Right. Yeah, just deal with the structure.
The client knows the content, but it's too embarrassing, too vulnerable, too something to share. And we set up the structure, and it will make perfect sense to the client, and everybody else will sort of like, what's going on? They're all behaving weird.
Recourse or resource?
Resource.
Resource.
A resource. So, oh, thank you. Resource. Yeah. Every situation has something in our favor. And particularly if we're stuck in the problem definition, we don't actually recognize that some things are pushing us along. Sorry, I'm in there. Yeah, so these are logic structures, and without any content, we can set up the structure. And the one that I was just paying attention to was the tetralemma.
yeah. What in the wide world?
There is no such thing as a dilemma, either or.
I love it.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
Never heard that word before.
You
It's
just wish some
there's-
letters.
there's an R after the second.
Tet-
It's not like
It's completely like, it has no tetralemma.
So
Yeah.
are you saying that you look at a dilemma and there's some unknown third option?
Either or neither both. So the dilemma is set up as an either or. And there's always a neither, and there's always a both. We just never think of them. We just complete. Yeah. And then some Varga von Tibet, I think he's Czech. He came up with the free element. So every logic structure for Matthias includes a free element. Something that is outside of the logic structure. He's a philosophy professor, so for him, every philosophical construct is stuck at a level of abstraction, and there's always something outside of that level of abstraction that is worth paying attention to. It's a spiritual, like as a facilitator, for example, we have no interaction with, like, we don't facilitate the free element. It's beyond our pay grade. The free element does whatever the free element does. You only get to ask a question to see what's going on.
So you set it up as a representative for either, representative for or.
Shall we try it?
Sure, but can we?
Does that seem?
Yeah, let's see what happens.
Oh.
But let's pee first. Yay!
The reaching that
It's the
matters.
the reaching and the ownership. We all here?
Yes.
So, hopefully, what to say.
Yeah, do they do that to each other? Okay. Roll back.
So maybe just as a word of warning,
Oh.
structural constellations are layered. They have many layers of meaning. So
Unlike regular constellations.
unlike regular constellations where it's mom and dad, and yeah, there's a little bit more of a pointer of what's going on and who is who.
Okay. All right.
And in structural constellations, either or, neither both. That's the first layer of explicit meaning. And then all these other layers are coming in. Oh, either or, that's mom and dad, yeah, being at odds. Suddenly the family starts to play out. And then, you know, chunk, like systems, cultural systems. And we want to be aware of it. You know, the other day I did a consultation with a local businessman, and he has a problem with his sales team. And we set up the official and the big issue. And just like expected, the business didn't give it. Didn't care at all about the sales issue. It was all focused on the hidden issue. And that was a family constellation waiting to happen. So we we accept a fair amount of ambiguity between the explicit structure, either or, both, neither, and what's showing up. And what's showing up becomes relatively ambiguous. So I'm only doing structural constellations with people who can tolerate ambiguity. If they're too concrete and specific, that'll freak them out in ways that are not useful. Or, you know, add complications that are just not useful from a consulting or helping kind of standpoint. Yeah. I'm assuming you can tolerate some ambiguity.
It's so helpful. Let me just add that whole frame is so helpful.
Yes, this explains many recent constellations to me. It's very useful.
Yeah, that's like we have the ability of the person to actually make use of the information, because if hanging out with ambiguity is not part of their world, and actually, you know, facilitating for the client. I think that's really way from this to the client, like their ability to actually.
In the family constellation, in the healing context, there are some useful assumptions that we're making. Right. I'm in pain, and you're helping me get better.
Yeah.
In the business context, that's about contracting. We stumbled across that a couple of times earlier.
Yeah.
In a business context, contracting and having an agreement about what the engagement is about, what the solution is, where we're allowed to look. Because of the many layers that are available, we need to actually make some explicit choices. Yeah. Am I helping you in your relationship with your boss or your colleagues? Am I entering, having permission to mention that, oh, maybe that's like your mom, that's kind of a family thing. That's part of contracting. If I'm not having a coaching contract where that is a permission to actually go there, then that would never pop out of my mind. I can think it, I can track it, I can wonder about like how does that match up with the family, because I know it does. I presuppose that it will, but I'm never going to make it explicit. So my relationship to the client and what implicit and explicit agreements we're having determines what I can or cannot do. And if I ignore it,
Uproar.
the consequences are like, yes, I lose all credibility.
Mm-hmm.
The relationship, in one way or another, the engagement is over. And then maybe over something completely different. Yeah, like, it has consequences, and they're relatively immediate. Even just arguing over like my fees, and thought we had an agreement, and now suddenly then they're misunderstanding. Like, something happens.
How do you set these agreements so that you know how far you can go? I mean, do you verbally say them before you begin, or okay, we just jumped right in because we're a class. Yeah.
And that's an agreement.
Mm-hmm.
We have an implicit agreement. You know, you have some implicit agreement about the video and what you're sharing and how it's accessible to everybody.
Would you actually
It's
write
family
out
constellations. Yeah.
write out a contract with them?
See, we're still dealing with business speak. So the person tells me, you know, I want you to help me with the turnover that we're experiencing in the team. Now that's my explicit contract. That also has some implicit thing about, okay, we're only talking like this department and this team. I'm not going to solve a problem at the portfolio level where no wonder this team isn't doing well, because the way they're organizing work is just really messy. And so it just finds a little bit of the boundaries that I will stumble into. And to some extent, sometimes the answer is, this is outside of the scope of your team. And then we can re-contract and renegotiate. Can we look at a higher level?
Okay, so you would do that in the moment. If you can see the constellation is going there, and that's probably the right place.
Yes, or I set it up to show that it's beyond the team and there's no question, even though I know it, we're setting up the constellations, the client sees there is no resolution in the team, at the team level.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and now I can sit down and say like, okay, we took a look, nothing's happening. Now we need to set up a boss or a boss's boss or somebody, yeah, and does that make sense? Is that in your sphere of influence? Do you even want to go there? Yeah. Or sometimes I say like, this looks a little personal. This would be useful, like you deal with that in some other context, because that sounds like it looks like a personal family thing issue. And then they may agree, like, no, I'm okay, we're doing it here, or something, yeah.
But you're going to say that in a meeting with other colleagues? This seems like a personal problem.
But then as you say that too, I'm thinking, is it personal with the employee or personal with the boss? Or, you know, there's a dynamic there that's between two people at least.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's both. It's always both. Yeah. So can we, in the context of the circle, set up the boss without embarrassing him or her?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and if we can't, that's not a constellation I'm going to venture into. So it's really different if the circle consists of people working at the same organization within the same department, interacting day to day. That's different. Like the consulting company, they fly in people from all over the world. So at some level, they're in the same organization. And at some level, they're complete strangers to each other because they don't ever cross paths. I mean, they may hear each other's names, or they're at the partner meeting, they may have a drink together, but they're not colleagues in a collaborative sense. So we have way more permission to go into the personal than if it's an intact team who are working together every day and they don't have a therapy agreement with each other. That's not, then it looks really different. The constellations look really different. And we never expose someone up the chain, where that undermines their authority. That's part of respecting order.
Well, then how do you work with that? You engage with that person to do a constellation with them?
Yes. Or you just point it out, or you punt, or I don't have rules there, but I will make it so that I will not embarrass or expose that person.
What if the team is just like hungry for it?
Hungry for the exposure?
Yeah, I mean,
Well, to like talk the truth about what's going on with their leader.
Yes. That's the team's responsibility to act on. I have to watch the integrity of my boundary to maintain credibility. Because if I breach confidences with the team, now the team knows I'm willing to breach confidences, and then I'm also willing to do it with them. And implicitly, they will get unsafe with me. If I'm willing to make other people unsafe, then we automatically start to assuming like, okay, that person is willing to make people unsafe. I'm unsafe.
So you wouldn't bring people in a role that weren't in the room, that are actually part of the system?
I don't know that that's a general rule. I've definitely done it before. Like, so I'm so lucky.
We like to talk because it's safer.
Yes. And I'm joining you. I'm already colluding. So the dilemma is being artistic, being the artist.
Yeah, you could say that.
What's a good way of saying that resonates with you?
Well, when you say the dilemma is being the artist, it's being the artist in an environment that isn't called for.
So the tension that we are not able to resolve at the moment is the living artist and the accountant, or the what are the two poles?
Yeah, I think that's fair to say.
And is it as specific as the accountant, or is it working well-paid professional and the accounting is just incidental? What is it?
I think I don't have enough experience in being a well-paid professional outside of accounting to really know for sure.
Okay, so accounting, yeah. That's just...
I like the idea of being a well-paid professional. But why can't I do something creative and be a well-paid professional? I guess maybe I've answered my own question.
And the answer is?
You have to find something creative and be a well-paid professional in order to get the fulfillment you seek.
Maybe. I mean, I've just done a constellation with a professional accountant in Boston, and she was convinced the accounting sucked, and that she needed to do something better in her life. The constellation completely disagreed.
Interesting.
She's like, accounting was awesome and creative and exciting, and that representative was hugely animated, and she was in the wrong job to
Well,
do accounting.
yes. I mean, this is what makes me wonder, like, should I be looking at the particular relationship that I have at this particular place instead of accounting versus artistry?
Yes. So I just realized that in service of the learning of the group, I've introduced structural constellations. And you're the guinea pig.
Great.
And I suspect we may want to return to your relationship with your boss later, just to see how that might play out. Or if there's somebody else who has a similar situation, we can do that too, but that's a bookmark because that's such a typical.
Well, we got 15 minutes before we break for lunch.
Yeah.
Are we gonna do a piece of work in 15 minutes?
Yes.
I think we agreed that we can go longer. Don't we break
Did
like
we?
one?
I think my
That's what I
stomach, I think my
thought.
stomach
agreed to
disagreed.
I thought we agreed to
The
go longer.
mutiny begins.
We, in the outline I gave to Volker, it said 12:30 for lunch, and he asked till 1, and everyone went, cool, till
Yeah.
1.
I see.
I have found this group checks out after 1. They just, as much as they're into what they're doing, I've noticed biological.
Here are your 5 cards. One more.
You almost got that one.
But it wanted to go somewhere else. Okay, so just put it in the
I'm
pocket,
not
right?
looking.
You looked away.
It's in my pocket. Not looking.
And I missed it.
Oh gosh. Okay, totally blind. Well, this seems kind of hot because you didn't get the one that you were supposed to get. So, fine review.
See if there's a relationship here. I feel like we could put you in your chair, but you're still in it.
What's happening for you?
I'm just tired, and I almost feel like a little kid. Like I feel like I kind of wanna, like I'm a little kid amongst adults, and I wanna be like, I wanna play, but I'm a little tired too. It's like I'm just kind of tired, but there's also kind of like a little kid kind of, yeah.
What's happening for you?
I feel really free. I want to walk around.
Where's your attention?
Everywhere.
Everywhere? Okay.
In the beginning, my attention was on this one. Still is, I guess. That's really about it.
That's the primary attention. Everybody else is sort of, who cares?
I have this sense of being proper, like worry about things being in order.
What offends your sensibility already?
Well, this feels unpredictable. Like I don't know what this one's doing. It feels like there's some danger. Like it's not orderly enough.
Where is your attention primarily?
Well, I notice all of them, but I'm more agitated by that one's more vivid,
Unpredictability
I
of
think.
that.
Yes.
Okay.
I also don't like that one's wandering around so much.
Oh, yeah.
Checked out and tired. So we're taking a nap probably. A little spacey. Happy to close my eyes and just kind of be
Can I see your card? Let's see it.
This was Amy's.
Mhm. How are you doing over there with the books?
So interesting. You know, like go out and read them. This is good idea.
Feeling good?
Yeah. Yeah.
Engaged?
Yeah. Very like interested. Want to learn. Everything is interesting. So interesting.
How are you doing?
You know, I'm just kind of. Yeah, I mean, I'm like, I could take a nap, but it like the heaviness is kind of backed off a little bit, and so like I'm feeling a little drawn to the one in the chair. Like I'm kind of like I almost kind of like want to go over there and lie down, put my head on one's feet or something, you know. But
So just make eye contact. Just acknowledge each other.
yeah, it feels good.
I feel a little more awake actually after that.
Yeah, me too.
Just to say something. I hardly ever think of you.
I hardly ever think of you.
What happens?
Well, this one, you know, pursed its lips and it was sad, so I was like, oh. Well. Yeah, it's weird. I'm feeling more energized. That's so weird.
How to get up?
Yeah, it's so weird, man. What the?
We're coming forward.
Yeah.
What's this after here?
I'm interested in them. It's suddenly very interesting. With like the jacket, cool shirt, with a cool necklace and shirt. You seem like cool people.
How are you with this one?
Neutral.
Who has most of your attention?
Still here. I wanna stop wandering around. What's important?
That makes me want to wander,
All right. How are you doing?
Good. You know, when that one was talking about the books and everything being interesting, I felt also interested. Like that was attractive. Like, well, I like things to be interesting.
They still have a sense of danger.
Less.
What make it different? When did it change?
Well, I noticed it when she was talking about things being interested. Then I was drawn, and like that would be worth like, not worrying so much if I have to be interested in things. I still feel like it's my job to worry about danger.
To worry.
Yeah.
All right. So, how is your relationship to this?
I like it.
Make eye contact and just hang out a little bit. Just hang out.
Yeah, she's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Friends.
Friends. Be friendly. Okay. Then the same here. For the two of you, just kind of acknowledge each other.
Okay.
What's that like? By contrast.
Not as much fun.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, just
So a sense of dutifulness, maybe?
yeah, I mean, you know, if I had to take a guess, I would say this is boss or something. I mean, it has that feeling, you know, and and it's hard to separate, like, you know, Jeff is the older male patriarch in the room. It's got all that weight.
Now that was a complete
Non-sequitur.
non-sequitur.
Yeah.
That you should know better. Like it's completely irrelevant.
Okay. I know this is.
Okay, so here, pause.
Okay.
This is how I deal with obnoxious references. I get really cross. The only way to get the attention of the representative is to get really cross. And I assert my quality. The words are not so important. The physical encroaching and asserting is, and then I find words that are semi-appropriate. More better than today.
Yeah.
Yeah?
Thank you.
But fundamentally, that's my, and I'm exaggerating a little bit because I think both of us really have fun. but I went really close.
Yeah.
And then I assert my facilitator stance to do his thing. I trust that his nervous system is willing to follow me. And then I find yours. All right. So, how do you feel about this guy?
You know, I feel a little. I feel generally okay, but I also feel like a little like watched over.
Like a burden put upon, like an obligation or something?
Well, this. Yeah, maybe that's it. Like there's a heavy quality about this one that I find myself resisting. Yeah. I like this one's lightness better.
How are you doing on the trip?
Huh?
You off again?
Yeah, I'm just like cozy in that way. It feels like, you know what? Once I kind of stood up, I felt almost like I should ask for permission before I stood up. Decided to try it, and then I just kind of lost steam and decided to sit down again. So I'm just feel comfortable.
Is there anything you're still looking for?
So crazy. I mean, yeah, I could make all kinds of conclusions,
All right. So, focus.
which means me, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Accounting.
No.
The artistic endeavor. Both and neither. So choosing neither, yeah, something that makes money and something that's fun. That's just dangerous and stupid. So that you wouldn't be in a good place, kind of obvious. Well, that was an interesting moment there,
Yeah.
where like, oh, I couldn't consider both.
And it was really like when that one sort of, I lost the attention with that one, and then sort of saw that one, and I was kind of felt myself needing to power down again.
Oh, is that why?
That was my experience.
Yeah, artistic endeavor feels really solid to me.
And there's a little bit of a sense of like
Yeah, it's like a,
beautiful.
yeah, I don't get fun. I don't get fun about this one. I get more
Yeah,
like,
it was fun.
yeah, it's more duty, obligation. It's not, this one is freaking fun. Like, I would hang out with this one anytime.
I feel like I could even buy the flip, you know, that like actually the fun is in the accounting and not in the artistic pursuit. But like when you two connected and you both kind of woke up, it was like, oh, okay, yeah, both is possible, you know? But then when you lost steam and went down, I was like,
I feel like I'm resting. I'm just like comfy over here. And it doesn't mean I can't get back up, but right now I'm just comfortable.
but then you said just now, connecting with this one, like over connecting with this one was when you lost steam, I
Here's
think,
what
as
I-
opposed to this one.
All right, so
Yes.
we're close to lunch. We're in service of going to lunch. This would be a perfectly good place to leave. And just, let her struggle. The scramble of the preconceived notions.
It's a step forward.
How the stories that we're telling us are fundamentally different.
And we are like accounting, it's accounting in her system.
Yes.
Yeah, her perception.
Yes. And that's a useful intervention. Yeah. And with your permission, I can show you how I'm inclined to do a move that blends the organizational and brings it back into the family context.
Oh yeah, let's do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lunch or not, we gotta see that. Come on.
You're the hungry guy, so you get to choose. So,
I mean,
Would
not
you
if
be
it's
willing
gonna
to
take
join
half
us?
an hour.
Oh, sure.
instead of exactly right behind him, and be ready to make eye contact, with the client, with the focus, the other person. That does not just stay there, but be ready. And you make eye contact. And you just step aside, and you continue eye contact behind.
Huh. I really like this one.
What's the emotional side?
There's love and affection. If I had to take a guess, I'd say, a parent and probably mom.
Oh, you know?
I feel a combination of sadness and hope. Both. My heart is like trembling on the edge of opening totally.
Mm.
And yeah,
I want you to have fun.
I want you to have fun in your life.
It's funny, I can hear the words, but I don't believe it.
Mm. Yeah.
So, out of love for you,
Out of love for you,
I'll make myself miserable.
I'll make myself miserable.
Just like
Just like
That is a bummer.
Yeah.
oh, but it feels good now here. It feels like a warm embrace.
We're really speaking truth to each other.
Well, just it's an expression of the love.
Yeah.
Like I'm feeling
That was my choice. But
That was
but
my choice.
my burden. That was my choice.
That my burden. That was my choice.
We don't
You don't have to repeat it. Leave it with me.
Okay. It feels okay.
I found my fulfillment by prioritizing my family.
I found my fulfillment by prioritizing my family.
Like you.
Like you.
You can make your own choice.
You can make your own choice.
And make sure fun is part
And make sure fun is
of it. No big eye contact. Check in with was crying. County is all emotional. And heart.
You know, they just feel like dear friends who I love.
Yeah, just check out.
Yeah.
I'll check out both over here. That's a possibility.
This one's feeling really sexy to me. It's like I want some quality time.
Yeah. It is possible. May take some looking around. It is possible.
Impossible.
Okay. You want to stand in here just for a little bit?
Sure.
Swap places.
Thank you for the honor. I leave it with you.
Was my mother?
So,
What was her original name?
I just added in as the entanglement, the loyalty that got blended into the artistic endeavor. Like fundamentally, there was a confusion or a projection on what artistic endeavor stands for and who's tied up with it. And it turns out it has nothing to do with whether we're artistic or not. It has everything to do with someone who had difficult trade-offs, just like your mom. So close enough.
I know brings up a lot more questions.
Isn't that what usually happens? So hang out with the question and just connect. And get a sort of embodied sense of how much you love your mom and the tension that dominated her life. And she chose. She actually chose sort of the good mother thing to do. Prioritizing her family and her kids. Over her own fulfillment and whatever else she was telling herself about. So that's a good thing to emulate. That sense of honor and And it's not your choice. Yeah, your choice is different. This was her choice with her family. That's different than artistic and help or making a living. You've commingled those, and they don't have the same. This has weight. This, as a decision, is entertainment.
Huh.
To provoke. Honestly. If you have to make a decision between taking care of your children or having a fulfilled professional life, that's a hard choice. By comparison, being artistic or making a living is not a hard choice. Particularly if we set up as an artificial tension that has a quite possible both option around the corner. It's an artificial tension that does not have the weight of family versus career. So separate the two. Give it back to your mom. That way of making it feasible. That's part of her life. And find a way of having some fun. To be able to pay the mortgage. It's doable. Does that sink in?
Yeah. Give me time for you.
Sorry.
I like that whole fun mortgage thing. I'm like, wow, fun mortgage. Fun mortgage.
Well.
Are we good? Can we leave it here?
We can leave it here.
As a representative, a good place?
Yeah.
All right, good. Great. All right.
You're creative accounting.
Triple bottom line accounting.
I didn't know
better
that
way of
accounting
watching.
could feel so good.
I know
Should I go back
That's how it's.
Creative accounting.
Yeah, creative accounting, it scares a lot of people.
Just great for a moment. I think 2 or 3 minutes so I get done. We're ready for lunch. So, we started out with an abstract logic structure. I did make it explicit that either or is accounting and artistic, whatever you call it. And then there are all these layers that are starting to show up. And my primary commitment stays to the original setup. Even the structural constellation, the original setup trumps. And then kind of starting to recognize where's the overlay, where's the emotional overlay that doesn't go with an endeavor. Yeah, and being burdened by it or feeling that wasn't, there was clearly a confusion between artistic endeavor and something else. So if we have permission in the space to blend organizational or structural constellation with family constellations, then this move of having one person step aside is sort of the primary way of dealing with projection. Like if we set up in a lot of team constellations and the boss stands there, And sooner or later, someone stands behind the boss and does that move. Like, who am I confusing my boss with? Yeah, and where's the real resolution of that tension versus having to figure out my relationship with my boss? And that's generally a mom or dad. And then we can have a conversation between ourselves and our parents and start to relieve the boss of having to function at this level. That's a pretty common move. When I have permission to blend the business or sort of the organizational side with the families. Are you ready for lunch? Was this helpful?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, it's a lot to think about.
Yeah, that accounting got a bad rep somewhere inside of you?
Yeah. Or maybe that being an artist got a good rep. I don't know.
Being an artist stands for something that may not be expressed in actually doing the art we want.
Doing the what?
The art. And what artistic endeavor?
Theater.
Theater? Are you on the side doing theatrical work?
I was for many years. It's been since I started this job that really haven't been fun.
Yes. So one of them got a good rap, and the other one got a bad rap. And and that's not unlike what we do with family systems. Yeah, where one parent gets the good rep and the other parent gets the bad rep. And we stop being very differentiated. Yeah, considering that you grew up without your dad, what I remember. There's an angel and a devil in your family. So the polarization that you're creating between accounting and artistic probably has direct correlation to the polarization you have in the way you hold your pen. So there's another constellation somewhere here with you.
Sure of it. That's big.
Talking about our professional biases and honoring our ancestors. Like our opening ritual. Thank you. All right, so we said 90 minutes, yeah, so that we have enough time for finding a place, ordering.
Can we be back in the chairs at 10 of 3?
Yeah.
Yeah. By that clock, so connect it with it. So, but back in our chairs and ready to go. So a little bit early to do your nesting rituals.
Who's going to lunch?
I'm going.
I'd like to go. The group?
Yeah.
I'm getting in the car and driving over to
I'll get
Piedmont.
this out of the way.
Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. They can do whatever they want. I'm getting food.
All right.
I'm getting food.
Mine was good.
Something, man. I'm like fucking
You brought that?
You what? You famished?
fucking
I'm
I'm full famished.
I'll go in here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah?
Anybody want to come? Going to Piedmont?
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
I got room for 4. Got one.
I don't have a car.
Oh, you have a car? Okay. Amy,
I can drive too.
you can drive too, Amy? Okay.
Okay, I'll go with you, Amy.
Sure.
I'm gonna do something else. Okay, man.
I have cards too, in case you want to come back.
Oh my God, I forgot the
Turn
card.
things off. Give me 2 seconds to just start processing the first half of the days.